In a small, smoke-stained tavern in 1637, a man named René Descartes slammed a glass of wine on the table, looked the barflies in the eye and said, "If I can doubt everything, then what remains is so bright it will never flicker." He went on to build a method that split mind from world, and centuries later, his doubt became the chisel every scientist and engineer used to carve the modern world. That one philosophical move, radical doubt, rewired how humans think, how we make technology, and how we arrange institutions. Fast forward 300 years, and a factory whistle blows in another town. Workers clock out, but their inner lives are shaped by a set of ideas they never read. A CEO in a glass tower makes a decision based on a model of human behavior built from a philosophical assumption. A nation adopts a law because thinkers argued a certain value was supreme. In milliseconds, philosophy ripples into policy, architecture, medicine, and the shape of cities. This is the quiet brutality and the secret power of philosophy. A sentence on a page can become a prison or a palace. Philosophy does not sit politely in books. It seeps into the walls of your home, the code on your phone, the rules of your workplace, the shape of your desire. Tonight, I'm going to show you why understanding philosophy is not an academic luxury. It's an operative technology. Understand it, and you can change your reality. Ignore it, and your life will be quietly designed for you. You think you live in a world of facts, numbers, objects, the way things are. But most people live inside maps they never drew. These are inherited metaphors. The market is like a machine. The mind is like a blank slate. Progress is linear. Those metaphors are philosophical claims dressed as common sense. They decide who gets power and who does not. Here's the shocking part. Many of the most destructive systems in history were built on philosophical accidents and unexamined metaphors. Colonial empires justified conquest with Enlightenment notions of hierarchy. Corporations justified exploitation with a utilitarian calculus that treats humans like units of productivity. Even our private suffering, anxiety, shame, boredom, is often a result of internalized philosophies, the cult of productivity, the narrative of self-improvement, that whisper we're never enough. The problem is double. We absorb philosophical frameworks by default, and we confuse them with reality. That confusion makes philosophy invisible, until you deliberately make it visible. When you do, you discover you were living in someone else's experiment. Philosophy is not abstract fluff, it's a technology, a toolkit for modeling the world, for deciding what counts as data, for prioritizing values. Consider 3 simple moves philosophy enables. Frame. The way you describe a situation changes what you can see. Call a protest riot versus insurrection and watch institutions react differently. Value. The things you treat as sacred direct resources and attention. If you value growth above all, you build growth engines. Method. Your ways of reasoning, empiricism, dialectic, mystic insight, become instruments that produce different kinds of truths. When thinkers reshape these 3, reality reshapes with them. Kant taught a lesson that changed centuries. We don't just passively receive the world. The categories of our mind actively shape experience. That idea turned epistemology into a design problem and birthed new sciences. Jung taught that archetypes, patterns of symbolic meaning, steer culture. Eastern schools taught that perception can be trained and altered through disciplined attention. Each philosophical intervention has practical consequences. Understanding philosophy gives you the ability to choose frames, design values, and pick methods intentionally, to become the architect of the micro-worlds that compose your life. Let me show you evidence. Stoicism, stress management. A few lines from Epictetus reoriented whole armies and later modern CEOs. Stoic practice reframes events as indifferent and judgments as controllable. That philosophical switch is the ancestor of cognitive behavioral therapy. People trained in Stoic practices reduce anxiety not by changing events, but by changing the internal narrative that interprets them. The result? Different neural patterns, different choices, different lives. Utilitarianism, public policy. Bentham and Mill's calculus turned moral philosophy into policy math. It enabled cost-benefit frameworks that built welfare systems, and also justified horrific trade-offs when misapplied. The point is, a single moral metric moved from salons to legislation and reconfigured how societies allocate lives and resources. Cartesian dualism, medical and technological worlds. Descartes' separation of mind and body opened the door for modern medicine and technologies, but it also spawned an ethos where the body is a machine to be optimized. That philosophical posture created both life-saving interventions and a culture that sometimes neglects subjective well-being. Buddhist attention practices, neuroscience and productivity. Meditative technologies from the East reframed attention as trainable muscle. Neuroscientists then quantified their effects. Corporate wellness programs and Silicon Valley startups weaponized those practices for focus and creativity. Philosophy became product. These are not coincidences. Philosophy is the lever under the fulcrum of history. If you want to change your reality, don't start with goals. Start with your frameworks. Here are 5 practical philosophical tools, each a mini technology you can install immediately. Frame engineering, rewriting the map. Pick one recurring problem in your life. Give it 3 different frames: mechanical, moral, narrative. For a relationship conflict, try it's a system malfunction, it's a test of values, it's a chapter in a story. See which frame frees new actions. Frame shifts unlock options. Value auditing, where your currency flows. List your top 5 lived values, not what you say, but where your time and money actually go. Are they aligned? If not, reassign resources to make values performative. Philosophy makes values concrete. Method swap, change your way of knowing. If you always reason analytically, experiment with a phenomenological pause. Describe sensory data without judgment for 5 minutes. Or try the dialectical method. Argue both sides of your firmest belief. Shifting method changes the kinds of truths you generate. Conceptual minimalism, taxonomy cleanup. Simplify your internal language. Cut jargon, collapse overlapping categories, and make your terms sharp. Vague categories let confusion hide. Precise concepts do work. Ritualize thought experiments. Live the hypothesis. Philosophers run thought experiments on paper. You can run them in life. Adopt a temporary stance. Act as if a different premise is true for 7 days. Notice how choices and outcomes shift. The experiment collapses dogma into evidence. Each tool is small, replicable, and measurable. Philosophy deserts abstraction when you treat it like a lab protocol. This sounds mystical, but neuroscience explains why it's real. Predictive processing, the scientific idea that the brain is a prediction engine, shows how your models, your philosophy, literally shape perception. If your brain expects scarcity, it filters inputs that confirm scarcity. If it expects abundance, it attends to opportunities. Reframe your expectations and the brain retunes synaptic weights. That's plasticity. That's practice. Philosophy is a bootloader for new predictive models. Epigenetics adds another layer. Long-term beliefs change stress hormones, which influence gene expression in small ways. Social neuroscience shows that shared narratives synchronize groups into coordinated behavior. So the amateur philosopher who changes a personal frame is affecting neural loops. The activist who changes a public frame is changing cultural neural synchrony. It's not a cult. It's biology meeting ideas. Not all philosophy is liberatory. Some ideas calcify into dogma and become weapons. Beware three corruptions. Absolutism. When a theory claims finality, it squashes inquiry. Instrumentalization. When ideas are used solely for power, they justify cruelty. Epistemic monopoly. When one method dominates, alternatives are silenced. History is littered with philosophers who wanted to free people and ended up constructing new prisons. The lesson: wield philosophy with humility and pluralism. Reality isn't only private. If you want structural change, you must change shared narratives. This is the politics of philosophy. Successful movements reframe issues so profoundly that institutions must adapt. Civil rights didn't win by changing individual attitudes only. They shifted the moral grammar of what was considered just. To change reality at scale, learn to tell different stories. Stories that make new behaviors not merely possible, but normal. Practical steps. Run micro-campaigns that change language. Relabel welfare as public insurance. Design rituals that embody new values, community skill shares. Build prototypes that make the imagined world tangible, local currencies, cooperative firms. Philosophy provides the grammar, you provide the practice. Together, grammar plus practice rewrites the social software. If you're ready to act, here's a 7-day micro-program. Day 1, Audit. List your implicit assumptions about one domain, work, love, money. Day 2, Frame Swap. Pick 3 new frames and apply them to a single decision. Day 3, Value Reallocation. Move 1 hour of your week to an activity that embodies a value you actually want. Day 4, Method Play. Spend 1 hour using a different reasoning method: phenomenology, dialectic, systems thinking. Day 5, Thought Experiment. Live as if for 24 hours and journal outcomes. Day 6, Share. Teach one friend the new frame and ask them to act on it. Day 7, Prototype. Design a tiny public ritual or tool that embeds your new idea. A morning micro-ceremony, a shared ledger, a neighborhood notice board. This is philosophy as iterative design. Test, measure, iterate. Imagine waking a year from now. The maps you use are no longer inherited frames but chosen instruments. You see options that were invisible. Your relationships shift because your values are visible and negotiated. Your community behaves differently because you and your peers swapped metaphors and built small institutions that honor that swap. You haven't escaped reality. You have built a reality more hospitable to purpose. That transformation is not mystical. It is the cumulative effect of repeated frame choices, method swaps, and public prototypes. Philosophy is the slow architecture of possibility. If you refuse to think of philosophy as practical, someone else will use it on you. That's not paranoia. It's historical fact. Ideas design systems. Systems design behavior. Behavior cements into habit. Habit into culture. Culture into law. Ignorance is not neutral. It is fertile ground for systems you might hate. So here is the choice. Continue living by default, obeying maps written by others, or become intentional. Learn the grammar of reality. Practice it like a craft. Test ideas in the world, build prototypes, tell new stories, defend the right to think differently, wake up, change your map, change your world. This is the Thought Alchemist.